Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Music Meltdown. We're doing an album review of an artist that I previously covered. Going to Taylor Swift. Kind of had to do this one. I like views, but no, I feel like this is an interesting record to talk about. The Tortured Poets Department by Taylor Swift. We'll probably briefly talk about the anthology as well. But predominantly, what this is going to be about is the core 16-track record. Um, let's just say before this record came out, I was not looking forward to it. This had bluntly cringe written all over it, and I hate using just like cringe as a description for a record or anything like that. But it really just sort of felt that way. A lot of these song titles are just looking at them like, they're not great, and just the really sort of even I can admit a bit sort of self-absorbed title. But how did the record fare? How did the record fare? Alex, how did you feel or think about this whole shindig?
Oh man. Well, first off,
I'll tell you.
I need to get my camera in focus so I can show off the Rolling Stone magazine cover with T Swift and Paul McCartney because it
Yep.
feels unfair to have that out of frame. Um, oh man. I I've heard this three times in full now, and that's three times including the anthology tracks, which normally I don't engross myself in like a record that I'm hearing for the first time that in depth. That's just not my listening style. It just happened to work out this way in this case. Uh, but even after three listens, I don't know that I really entirely know how I feel about this.
Same.
I think what it is, like, uh, full stop, I'll just get this out there. I like it. I really like it. Um, and I think that there will be a lot that I'm sure I will have to say about kind of the public response to this, which has just been one gigantic clusterfuck no matter what way you look at it. I don't think the positive responses to the album have been entirely rational. I don't think the negative responses to the album have been entirely rational. And I don't even think the critiques of the responses have been rational. But that's besides the point. I think the starting impression I get is this is I think a technically very well done record that I feel like combines a lot of what Taylor has been doing on recent projects. I think the Midnight's influence is the heaviest, certainly mixing in some of the like bonus tracks that she's done on, like I'm thinking of like Is It Over Now from the 1989 Taylor's version, which for my money, by the way, is the worst thing she's ever put out. But I think it's a lot of that kind of sound. And then, of course, the anthology, you have your Aaron Dessner tracks, which we'll get to. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot going on here. This album's kind of a fucking mess. Um, and I think it's a well done mess in a lot of ways, but she is it's amazing how the production, and I'm curious how you feel about this, how the production can be, I think, in some ways very sedate and sleepy. Like there are some of the most I would agree with this critique that I think there are some tracks on here that are among the most milk toast production jobs that she's ever had. But then you combine that with these lyrics that are kind of some of the most out there sentiments that she has ever tried to express. I mean, it's just kind of an all over the place lyrical perspective that she's taking here. But I'm curious, kind of, before we get into the meat of it, kind of what your impression was.
My immediate perception here is this record, sort of in sound, I would say most harkens back to, you say Midnights. For me, actually, I get the most 1989 on here. This sort of feels like an amalgamation of 1989, the 2020 records, as well as Midnights, is sort of how I feel, with sort of a more lyrical approach akin to a record like Reputation. Really, this does feel like 2014 Taylor, and onward sort of just shoved into a blender. You get everything that she did past that point, including Lover, because as much as Lover's good, it doesn't really have its own distinctive sound in her catalog, I would say. Despite that, however, I do agree that these arrangements are, for the most part, a lot more sort of laid back in comparison to a lot of her other works, even in comparison to the 2020s records. However, I think that that kind of helps to better suit them because my predominant issue at Midnights is that I felt a lot of that record was very over the top and very overdone, especially on the production department. This feels like Antonov put all of his effort into Midnights, so there's like nothing here. And I'm not saying that to say that the record sounds bad, that it sounds sleepy or anything like that, but it just sounds far less produced, which personally I think better suits the material. However, some people say that it doesn't, and that is what it is.
I think, well, and the thing with Midnights, and I think just to remind people who are watching, we come at Midnights from very different perspectives. Midnights is your least favorite T Swift, and it's pretty high up for me. Not as high as it used to be, but I still hold it in very high esteem. But yeah, Midnights, what works about Midnights to me, I think, is the hooks that it has. It is very bright, even in its kind of more, um, even in its slower, more moody moments, I suppose. I feel like the production still kind of jumps at you on some level. And the production here feels very secondary. And maybe that's like kind of the intentionality of it, because the focus here, I think, very much is on Taylor's lyrics and the emotions that she's trying to process here. And I think just even talking about those, because I feel like when people are talking about Tortured Poets Department, like lyrics are one of the primary things that people are talking about right now, and namely one of the first things that people I think are criticizing. This this is the Taylor Swift record that is the hardest to separate from the lore that surrounds her and that surrounds her life. And in part because of that, and in part because of it being more musically sedate overall, I think this is probably the this is not your go-to number first Taylor Swift record. If you're trying to get into Taylor Swift, like there's no way I would recommend this as your first album. And I don't think this is an album that is going to change anybody's opinion on Taylor Swift. If you already liked her, you are probably going to eat all of this up. If you didn't like her, there's no way in hell this changes your mind, because this record will probably have at least one characteristic about her music that already pisses you off and then magnifies it. But I think just going back to the lyrics, though, there's so much that is so caught up in the specifics of her relationships with all these people. Joe Alwyn, Maddie Healy is here a lot, or is referenced a lot. Uh, you almost feel bad for Travis Kelce because he basically gets like what, one or two songs on the entire album that are about him for the most part. Um, and they're not among the better ones in my opinion. But again, there's like so many things that are very specific references to her own life, and the lyrics really, I think, promote that. And because of this, I'm not saying she hasn't done that in the past. You have your Dear Johns and things like that. But I don't think this album is quite as relatable to the average person in a way that a lot of her other material is. And if there's one criticism that I think I can throw at the record, it is probably that. This seems very much about Taylor herself and her situation, and it doesn't really apply to the average person. Now, that said, I said this is a criticism. She has no obligation to make music that is meant to be universally relatable. There's no requirement in the Taylor Swift record contract, at least that I know of, that says you have to make songs that are generally relatable. It's just, I think that objectively is an appeal to her music. I think a lot of people, a lot of her fans would say as much. And I think because of that, this is a record that requires her fans and the listeners to kind of, I don't know, reprocess that relationship a little bit, especially when she has some lyrics here that are basically like middle finger fuck yous to certain aspects of her fans. So I don't know. How did you feel about the lyrics to this overall?
But no, yeah, that was actually something that I was wanting to ask you about because there has been a constant discussion about this record lyrically. One thing, I'll lay it out there, I have not fully explored this record on a lyrical level. I've mainly just overheard certain passings as I'm listening to the record. How directly intertwined to herself do you think that this is? Because I don't think that this whole record is like autobiographical, like some people like try and claim and try to assess almost. I do think that there is a degree of separation in very much points in which it's not directly about her as much as it's maybe inspired by things that
Yeah,
could have happened.
yeah. I think there are points for sure. I think they are more few and far between in the first half compared to the anthology. But I agree. I think there are certain songs that, if nothing else, even if they are probably references to these people in her life, are at least general enough to where the average person can probably relate to them on some level. I'm thinking about something like, uh, again, this is not one of my favorites, but My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys. I think that's generic enough to where a lot of people could probably relate to that feeling of being discarded or whatever by a former romantic partner and that sort of thing. But yeah, when I think about stuff like um, So Long London, I think is a good example where it's hard to separate that one from the specifics of her relationship with Joe Alwyn. Um, I think even more specifically, um, I'm thinking of the title track to the record and the bridge section of that one, which is where she does something that I don't think she does that frequently in her music, which is actually literally name drop people. She name drops Jack Antonoff, Lucy Dacus, um, in the context of, um, again, whichever relationship. I think this one's about Maddie Healy. Um, and I think that name dropping in and of itself creates that little degree of separation. But I, but no, I think I agree overall with your general point. And I think my big thing with the lyrics too is there is this idea that there's like incompetence with these lyrics and that these are lazy, that these are poorly done, that they are tailor by numbers. Um, I again, I think it's an acquired taste type of thing, and I think if you don't give a rat's ass about her as a person, but you don't have to, you do not have to, um, then I would imagine most of these lyrics are probably going to fly over your head, not in the sense of like people are not able to appreciate them, but just like they're not meant for you. But I would not describe these lyrics as lazy. I think if anything, there is this feels like a whole this album feels like one big ass vent session, which makes sense considering I'm pretty sure this was made for the most part in the summer of last year, which is around the time that the Maddie Healy stuff was going on and before Travis Kelce comes into the picture. So this is a time period when like her relationship is like again under like massive scrutiny, and she on this record and in a lot of songs where she talks about Maddie Healy, I'm thinking about But Daddy I Love Him, for instance. Like she's very defensive and she's very like um she's very much, I think, kind of I don't know what the word is, but taking that approach of like lashing out, I guess would be the best word for it. Like, and I think there's a lot of themes of, to your point about reputation, there's a lot of themes of paranoia here and a lot of second guessing herself and a lot of questioning and doubting romances, even if they're going well, questioning her fans, like we talked about. I think But Daddy, I Love Him is like a really great example of that. And that song in general is one of my favorites here because I think it's that balance between like jubilation and hatred. Because the instrumental is very like ecstatic in the choruses. It's one of the best choruses on the album, in my opinion. But then you have those lines like vipers dressed in empath's clothing, that line that is about certainly people who claim to support her, whether that's people in her inner circle or whether that's her fans. I tend to think that's about her fans. And then she has a whole bridge that I think is very clearly about certain parts of her fan base. It's powerful. And I'm gonna be honest, and maybe this is a hyperbolic statement, but I can't think of too many times when a pop artist that major is willing to say things that are that cutting about their fan base. Like if anything, they're protective, they are appreciative, come hell or high water. But that this to me is kind of new. And I don't know. And maybe I'm a homer. Maybe I'm giving her a bit too much credit for this, but I think it's certainly uncharted territory for her. And I think in general, as major pop stars go, it's pretty unusual. But yeah, I just think in general, I think these lyrics, I think there's clunkers here because I think there's a clunker lyric in probably every Taylor Swift record somewhere.
Yeah.
But man, I don't know. I don't think it's nearly as bad as it's made out to be.
I think on here it's less so a clunker lyric, because personally, I actually, at least from what I've gathered, like I said, I haven't fully dove into the lyrics. I don't think that there's any outward line in which I could immediately have pointed out as much as just much of a clunker as Florida is, which I'm curious your perception on that track, because to me, it's clearly the weakest link here.
I I don't know how I feel about Florida.
That's fair. Seems like
I
Taylor
get
doesn't know how she feels about Florida in the song, so
That's true. I mean, I get that that song is like meant to be kind of a stylistic shift too, because it's a
yeah.
bit more in the style of a Florence and the Machine song. But I'm not crazy about how Florence Welch's voice mixes with Taylor's here.
It,
And I don't think the hook is great either.
I
I don't know.
agree. Florida is just a weird word, like phrasing wise. Like you can't really properly put it into a melody like she needs to. It's weird.
It's yeah, it's like a syllabic structure type of thing. And one that she chooses what is it? Florida. And the
Yeah,
emphasis is on the duh. It just kind of I
it
don't
sounds
know.
really clunky.
It's a bit awkward. I much prefer the Post Malone collaboration. And
Yeah.
granted, I am a relative defender of Post Malone compared to a lot of people in the YouTube YouTube music crit landscape, as it will. I think Beer Bongs and Bentleys and Hollywood's Bleeding are both solid enough albums. I don't think he's made a great album, but I think those are solid. But I think he fits in much more snugly than I was expecting him to. He kind of
Well,
just like acts as a backdrop to the whole thing with a couple of leads here and there, and I think he serves the song really well.
I will say because I was actually just thinking about this. Mind you, my radar hasn't been as hyper focused on pop as it may have been in prior days, but like Post Malone really doesn't seem as relevant as he used to be. He's definitely, at least from my perspective, fallen off, as I would say, at least compared to like his high points. So I'm honestly kind of surprised he even got a feature in and of itself, but I guess I've not been paying enough attention because I fully agree. He sounds legitimately fantastic across the song. It's probably my favorite thing I've heard from him in general. I think that that track is just fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great song. It's very hypnotic, I think. And
Absolutely.
it's definitely top five. I don't have a ranking handy, but it's definitely a top
Yep.
five song for me on this whole project.
Nice. And to counterpoint off a previous point you were making about how heavily this record talks about her fans, I feel like the most direct stance at that is upon track 14, The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived, which I think for me is the evident lyrical triumph upon this record. I think that just sort of the whole perspective of this track in general, because at least from what I gathered, this person seemingly got with Taylor in some way and eventually ends up murdering her. And sort of that's sort of how it plays out or whatever. I'm immediately blanking on it, but I just thought that that track is so biting, so sort of captivating in how she portrays it from like this almost ghostly perspective. It's really interesting to me, and it's fairly new. I haven't heard somebody tackle something like this directly, despite it honestly being something that could very easily happen.
Yeah, I really like that one too. I think it's one of the songs on here that makes me like the most uncomfortable, I guess. Um, there's a couple of them. I think the obvious one is Who's Afraid of Little Old Me. That whole fucking song, I think, is like meant to be very disconcerting. And, to go back to Smallest Man for a second, I think that one works in large part because of like the dynamics of it. It's one of the most bombastic because that's a Dessner track there, and that's one of the most bombastic things he's ever done for her in like the choruses and towards the later part of the song. And yeah, the lyricism on there is cutting, is really cutting. And I would say it's like it's the best and most concentrated bit of like rage that I've heard on a Taylor Swift song in a long time. And when she like gets upset at somebody and writes a song about that person and it's like focused, you get Dear John. You get All Too Well. And I don't think that song, I don't think Smallest Man is quite at the level of those two songs because I think those two are two of the best things she's ever done, probably. But I think it's definitely a relative triumph for sure. Um, I love the like what is it, the pre-choruses, I think, when she gets like really into like her lower register. I always love when she does that. She has a really good low register that I wish she used even more than she does. But yeah, that one's great. I think to go into Who's Afraid of Little Old Me, just because I think that's relevant. I'm very, very curious what you think of this song because this is definitely, I think, one of the more polarizing ones among people. Um, to me, I think I don't know. It just it reflects. I don't think she's telling us to take her feelings seriously because it has the line, you wouldn't last an hour in the asylum where they raised me, the one that everybody is just making a quote out of, making a meme out of, putting in Instagram bios right now. I mean, it's everywhere. Um, like I don't know. To me, I don't think she's intending for us to take this at face value. I think this is more like her documenting what frankly might have been like a mental break or something like that she experienced. I mean, this whole song is just kind of all over the place. Again, you talk about paranoid. This is probably the most paranoid song she's ever done, including anything on Reputation. And especially when you couple this with like her vocals on here when she's like screaming out those choruses and things like that, it's just again, it's like disconcerting. And for this song in particular, like I can't quite get past that. With Smallest Man Who Ever Lived, I enjoy that song, even though it's kind of uncomfortable to listen to. This one, it's difficult. I respect it a lot, but it's hard for me to derive enjoyment out of listening to this because this genuinely does sound like the perspective of someone who is kind of having like a mental break or something like that. And I don't know, that's kind of a weird thing. I'm very curious what you think of that one.
I do understand what you're saying, and I feel like this is the biggest evidence for why I should have read the fucking lyrics. because I quite enjoyed that song. I think it has probably one of the better builds across the entire record, more than likely because it's the longest or second longest track on the entire record, so it has more time to properly develop. That is one of those songs in which I personally perceive that more so as something of a character study. Obviously, probably derived from a bit of her own experiences, but probably like more so a perception about like her going off the rails and what would have happened or could happen, as opposed to her genuine like potential breakdown that she's tried to like rush under the rug or something, you know. That's sort of my immediate perception upon the track. However, didn't read the fucking lyrics like a dumbass. So
But I think that that's a good point though, because like it's that gray area. Like when you have artists who incorporate aspects of their actual personal lives into their music, like at what point does it become fiction and at one point does it actually depict reality? When you're talking about like, is this a hypothetical? It very well could be. Like she's kind of foreshadowing, like, hey, maybe this could happen to me. Maybe I think this will happen to me if I keep going down the road that I'm going. It's hard to say. So we'll never know. We'll never know for sure. But yeah.
alrighty. I feel like where we're at here is probably good a good transitionary point to try and discuss a bit of the anthology tracks, which I think both you and I have mentioned we aren't as intently familiar with these as the initial record. However,
This one, well, it's funny because I stayed the night that this dropped, I listened to the proper studio album, right? And it was 1 a.m. or something like that. And I'm in bed and I'm lying in bed and I was out of town for work. So I was in a hotel bed. I'd taken melatonin and I was dozing off, browsing through Twitter. And all of a sudden I see Taylor's tweet about, hey, there's another album. And I'm like, fuck off. I'm not listening to this right now. So what ended up happening was I listened to the first record at like midnight, um, like when I was about ready to fall asleep. And I listened to the second record at like 6:30 a.m. right after I got up. So yeah, definitely. I'm sure that probably affected my initial impressions of the record because I was probably sleep deprived in both cases. But no, I've heard the anthology all I've heard the anthology as many times as I have the actual record because I don't know. I don't I don't feel like considering these bonus tracks. To me, this feels like an extension. Like I'd almost consider this like an extension of the album that basically is part of the album. Like if I'm like in my head, if I were evaluating like where would I rank the Tortured Poets department among Taylor's catalog, like I don't think I could ignore all 16 tracks or whatever it is on the second disc. Like I don't think I could do that. I think I'd have to include them in the main piece. I'm not sure if you agree or disagree with that, but I feel like they are worth talking about as part of the main thing.
I would personally disagree more so just because that's not what was released as the proper record. It was released as something entirely separate, is sort of my perception upon that. And I almost view them more akin to sort of like the second disc of the Taylor's versions. This is essentially a Taylor version of a record that didn't need a Taylor's version, which means higher stream counts, baby. But no, ultimately, though, I don't have too much to say about a lot of these songs. As I mentioned to you earlier, this is predominantly produced by Desner, and as such, it feels very much like a continuation upon Folklore Evermore to me. Probably the most immediate song across this backtrack to me was The Bolter. I thought that track was great. I remember thinking Cassandra was very strong. And I thought the Albatross as well was a good one. I don't have too much to say about these. I've only really heard these ones once. I did find this batch to be a lot more hit and miss. There's ultimately 7 out of these tracks that I didn't ultimately care that much for. So I do feel like for the most part, she did make the right call for what made the record proper. It's more so just I find these sort of less engaging to talk about, at least personally, because I don't feel they were really meant to be any more than just like an extra, like a side, you know? That's sort of my perception upon it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm very inclined to be very partial to Aaron Dessner's collaborations because he's responsible for two of my three favorite Taylor Swift records at this point. Um, but on here, I think it's kind of half and half for me. There's about half of the songs that I could more or less take or leave. I don't think there's anything bad here. People, I feel like, especially the track So High School, the Travis Kelce track, I feel like a lot of people have kind of singled that one out as like, no, this is probably the worst thing on the record, or at least the most uninspired thing on the record.
Uh-oh, I liked it.
Well, and like, I don't know. That might be my least favorite song on here. It's hard to say, but I will say I will agree with the person who tweeted something along the lines of like, it's amazing how much inspiration Taylor can get from like Maddie Healy and Joe Alwyn and all these people she's dated, but she comes to Travis Kelce and she's fucking stumped. So she writes So High School about how they're like playing Grand Theft Auto or whatever because she doesn't know what to say about him. I thought that was very funny, but maybe also indicative of a much less toxic relationship this time around. So good for her. Um, but I kind of like the indie rock texture that it has there, and it's just so that one like sonically stands out from everything else on especially that disc in a way that feels very refreshing. And again, it's nice to hear a track that is really genuinely like ebullient and joyful and cheerful. Because this is not a very happy record for the most part. It's pretty fucking depressing, at least the first half of it. Um, so it's nice to get some positivity. Also, I Hate It Here. That song, that's the one with the other line that people make fun of about her wanting to live in the 1830s, but without the racism or something like that. It's clunky. It's the clunkiest line on the album, in my opinion. But I like the song, and I like the song because you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Ivy from Evermore. And that's kind of the secret sauce for especially the second half of the anthology. A lot of the strongest songs on there are in the second half, and some of them, not all of them, very clearly recall these ideas that she was exploring in Folklore and Evermore. And, yeah, it's a little bit on the nose sometimes. Like Cassandra, which might be my favorite song on the anthology, reminds me a lot of Mad Woman from Folklore, which lately has been possibly my favorite song on Folklore. I love that track. The song Peter, very reminiscent of Champagne Problems from Evermore. Um, and then other songs that I think very vaguely like have general similarities texture wise, like The Prophecy, I think is fantastic. The Bolter, I agree, is great. Um, And then you have Robin, and Robin is, I think that's one of the ones that Fantano called out as he actually liked. He hardly liked anything on these records, but I think he liked that one and maybe Peter. But Robin is nice because that is like completely it like tears down the outside world for a bit. And it's just Taylor writing this song that I think is dedicated to Aaron Dessner's daughter, or son. Um, and it's this very, and she's done this type of thing before too, is dedications to like young kids. And it's very like wholesome, like protect yourself from the outside world, protect your innocence while you still have it, but not in like a preachy way, in a very like sincere way. And it just kind of it works as a nice reset from all the other chaos and bullshit that you've just heard for the last 2 hours. Like Robin is a very nice reset. Um, Entering the final track, the manuscript, which I also really like. Um, but yeah, I think like half the tracks on the anthology do feel genuinely like bonus track quality, the type of things where like they would not rank among my favorite songs by any means. And frankly, I don't know how many songs in this whole project would rank among my favorite Taylor songs, if I'm being honest. But I think the second half of the anthology to me is like really high quality stuff, or at least stuff that I'm like super partial to. But that's just me.
Seems like we roughly have similar takes, if not the same, upon that one. Just more so you feel they should be more properly considered in the general Taylor discography than I do. Alrighty, I guess it is now time to just sort of properly score and just sort of say how we feel about it in relation to her catalog. Figure, I feel like we're going to have similar opinions upon this record. It's just more so how we score them. Because I'm pretty sure I know where you're scoring this. For me, this is a 3.5 star record. I like it. I don't think it's anywhere near her best per se. It's rather middle of the pack, all things considered, and similar to what you were saying, I don't think it has any like truly standout all-star Taylor songs. Fortnite is probably and the title track for me are probably the closest. I actually do think tracks 1 through 7 on here are all incredibly strong. It really is Florida that just hits you like a crash in the middle for me. But yeah, that's sort of how I'm feeling. I think it's a pretty good record. It more than likely won't even make really my top 25 at the end of the year, but it might make my top 50. So I like it.
um, yeah, I struggle with it. Like I said, I still don't feel entirely secure about my score. I think I'm in between a 4 and a 4.5. Um, and I think like you said, I think there's quite a bit of strong tracks. I do agree. I think for the most part, early on in the main record, it's pretty damn strong for the most part. A couple of songs I didn't mention, by the way, Down Bad. I really like Down Bad. That's one of my favorites on the whole thing. Um, and what's the other one I wanted to talk about? I Can Fix Him. No, really, I can. I love the country influence on that one. One of the And very strange because like Destiner's done some country influence production in the past, but this is an Antonov production produced piece. And to me, I think this song like throws out the idea that Antonov can't bring original ideas to Taylor anymore. I agree that they should probably take a break, but like that song doesn't sound like anything else they've ever done together. I digress. Between 4 and 4.5 stars, and I think for now I'm still at 4.5, but I feel like if anything, this record has probably grown slightly off of me since first listen. So I could see it dropping down to a 4. For right now, I think this means I would put it ahead of her first three. I would put it very slightly ahead of Speak Now and certainly ahead of Fearless and the self-titled. Right now, I don't think I could put it above anything else. Because I just don't
That's good.
think, but
It's good because next in your ranking is Red. It
yeah,
is not better than Red.
and it's like I look at it one as I don't think any of these are going to sit in my all-time favorite Taylor Swift songs list. Like I don't think any of these would make my top 10 for sure, probably not my top 20. I don't know if they'd make my top 30. Um, and the other piece of that too is just like I have to grapple with the length of it. It's even if you're
Yeah.
just ranking like if you're just ranking the main album, it's 65 minutes long. Speak Now is the only record in her catalog that's longer than this. Um, and if you add the anthology, which again, in my opinion, like I would do, and I am doing for this exercise, what are the odds that I'm going to be listening to this 2 hour record a lot of times straight through in the future? I say that having listened to that 2 hour record 3 times in the last week, but I don't think that pace is going to keep up.
It
Um,
will I will counter it by saying this. Um, well, for one, I don't think that the anthology is really how she envisioned the record to be listened to. I could be wrong there, but I don't really think that's any more than, well, to be honest, kind of stream bait mostly. Like, obviously,
yeah,
they were completed songs and whatnot, but I feel like predominantly that's more so just to get the higher streams and stuff on platforms. However,
Hmm.
I think even when grappling with the length, that's kind of, I feel like even you can agree the issue with most Taylor records is a lot of them run even a bit over long, even the best ones. So
Yeah.
personally, I don't have too much an issue with that.
Yeah. I think if this was a more if this wasn't as like calm and like again like sedate for the most part as it is, then like more varied production, then I think I could get behind the length more. But I don't know. I mean, then again, I love Evermore, and Evermore is not the most diverse album production wise either. So maybe I'm just a hypocrite. I don't know. But point is, I think I will say if I separated the two, if I'm just ranking the first half, maybe I'd put it ahead of Red. It's closer, at least at that point. If I'm just ranking the anthology, anthology alone is probably like it's definitely below Speak Now. I don't know if I'd place it below Fearless. I don't think I would. Um, because Fearless, I think, also suffers from like the loudness war, like really loud production. And again, I think she's still growing into her songwriting there. But yeah, the anthology brings it down a little bit. It's definitely the weaker half for me, even if there's still some great stuff.
I'd, I'd agree. To clarify where this would fall in my ranking, Midnight is still at the bottom, followed by the debut, Fearless, Speak Now. I would have it just above Speak Now and then just below Lover. And then the rest of my ranking stays the same as what I had prior. So
Fair
it's
enough.
a comfortable, I want to say that's sixth or seventh.
Yeah.
I still like it. So, and really that's just sort of been general for me. Taylor as an artist, ever since doing that, just continues to grow higher and higher for me. As
Hmm.
you will see whenever I put out the video where I rank the first 100 artists that I covered on this channel. A lot of people won't like that video. But
Yes. Speaking of things that people won't like, can I just get on my soapbox really quickly about the criticism of this record for one final time?
please.
Excellent. I here's my take because, like I said at the beginning, I think the praise of this record has been over the top in some circles. I don't mean Rob Sheffield because I think Rob Sheffield is enthusiastic, right? People clown on him. I think Rob Sheffield is a fanboy, and I don't think there's anything wrong with a fanboy having a place in journalism. That shit happens. We have plenty of negative Nancy's out there to be realistic or whatever. Um, but I think definitely like the quote unquote stan reaction to the record and the over not just the overwhelming praise, but I think the willingness to suppress negative reactions to this record has been absurd, certainly. I think there's room for negative criticism of anything. I think that gives people a more three-dimensional picture of how we evaluate art, how we evaluate music. Um, and but man, I think the negativity that certain people and certain publications have shown about this album is so just it's so over the top. And I understand the foundational idea behind this is someone who is being thrown in our face at every chance we get. She is one of the most popular pop stars who has ever either popped or starred. There is no escaping that level of acclaim. Um, and I totally get that that is an annoying thing for a lot of people, and I don't expect that people should worship the rich and famous by any means. But I think a lot of people have approached this record with their perspective very tainted by that going in. I don't know that I'm going to 100% say that like a lot of the critics or even a majority of the critics or whatever went into this expecting to hate it. I don't know that if I go that far, but I think a lot of people have gone into this record with bad faith. And I think a willingness to not, I don't know, not interpret anything in any way other than, oh, this is another self-centered rich person complaining about how rich she is or how famous she is and this, that, or the other thing. And I'm not trying to grandstand and defend Taylor Swift herself. She doesn't need anyone's defense. She is a billionaire. She can cry into her fat stacks of cash all she wants. That's not what this is about. I think what this is about is how we approach art, regardless of who makes it. And I think we can do better than the negative discourse that we've seen. If anyone's read the Paste magazine review that people did, the anonymous review that they did, because the last time they did a review, their reviewer was harassed or something like that. Valid concern, shitty review, horrible review. And I'm not saying that because it was negative. I'm saying that because it was clickbaity and disgusting and all her first line is about Sylvia Plath putting her head in an oven or something like that. It's just really bad taste. And like if that's the standard of negative criticism that we're applying to this album, then that's pathetic. And we can do better. Um, and having said that, I've seen people criticize like both the negative and positive criticisms by just saying, "Oh, well, I think it was it Bloomberg or something like that who wrote an article making this criticism about how like, well, it's just because people didn't give this album enough time. Like all these hot takes are annoying, and that's because people didn't give this album enough time. One, that's not a thing. Like people can review albums based off of one listen. There's no problem with that. Also, number two, like people forget about early access. There's no way Rob Sheffield didn't have access to this album weeks ago, probably before writing that glowing review. So another short-sighted point. It's just the whole discourse around this record is so fucking stupid. And I think people just need to get their heads out of their asses a little bit and just like, I don't know, try to listen to things. Try to be a bit more open-minded. Try to like appreciate things on their merits and not completely disregard who the person is who's creating it, because I think that's kind of a silly thing to do. But I don't know. Maybe the moral of the story is kumbaya. I don't know. It's been a very frustrating discourse across every music community that I've been a part of, all of social media, everything. It's just been nauseating to read. And I think, I certainly think this is a moment where we, as appreciators of music, as critics of music, as fans, first and foremost of music, kind of need to look in the mirror a little bit about, hey, what attitude are we taking towards the act of reviewing, towards the act of criticism? Is that helpful? Is that fruitful? And are we getting the point across? Which, to me, the point seems to be like trying to find music that we like and trying to enjoy music. Like to me, that seems like it should become first and foremost over everything. But I feel like not everyone thinks that way, and that's a little bit disappointing. Boomer rant over.
At the end of the day, all that we need is peace and love. This all connects back to Ringo, bitches. Ringo's country album coming back. Let's go. God.
No, 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 no. But that's a good point too. And I won't go much longer on this. But Ringo, those who watched the Ringo Starr video know that that was not a very positive video. There were a lot of records that we were both criticizing and that I was certainly criticizing, but I don't get joy out of shitting on things either. Like, I don't love telling people that What's My Name by Ringo Starr is one of the worst albums I've ever heard. I'm just telling you, like, it is. And I think there's aspects of it that I just genuinely think are not well done on a technical level. My favorite part of that video was beyond just going back and forth with you, because I think it's really engaging and interesting when we do that, was like trying to defend some of the records that I think are underappreciated or underrated, like Ringo the Fourth, like Old Wave, like albums that I'm not going to champion as great, but I think are worth a listen and that I ended up enjoying way more than I expected when I revisited the discography. Like that's the highlight for me. And to me, it's just kind of like, again, that is the point. That's why I talk about this stuff. That's why I do my channel. That's why I appear on your channel, is to talk about what we appreciate and what we like. And I don't know. I wish we had more of that.
Absolutely. That being said, I don't want my channel to be known as having fucking hour-long reviews of random ass albums, but this was fun per the usual. Appreciate you having been around. If you made it this far, Alex's channel, Music Deep Dive, go ahead. Had a good video on the Kingston Trio recently. Gotta shout out that one instead of the Beatles because people have probably seen the Beatles one already. With that, with that being said, I hope that you enjoyed this and you all had a good time.